All right, everybody, welcome to the Otherppl Show, a weekly podcast featuring in-depth interviews with today's leading writers. I'm Brad Listi here in Los Angeles. Great to be with you. Appreciate you tuning in, and I hope you're doing all right. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button wherever you listen. You can also subscribe on YouTube, and you can follow me on Instagram and Bluesky. So my guest today is Kashana Cauley. She is making her triumphant return to the podcast, celebrating the publication of her sophomore novel entitled The Payback. It is available now from Atria Books. The Payback is a heist novel set in contemporary Los Angeles. It is also a wicked send-up of the student loan industry. It tells the story of three women, co-workers, who meet each other while working retail at a local shopping mall, and eventually they band together to take down the student loan industry. The Payback is witty and wickedly funny and politically subversive, all the things that Kashana Cauley has become known for, both in her literary work, but also in her work as a writer for film and television. She wrote for The Daily Show with Trevor Noah for a time, and she is prolific on social media. Many of you probably follow her on Bluesky, formerly I think on Twitter, and she's just super, super funny and always coming up with the jokes on social. So very pleased to have Kashana Cauley back on this program to talk with me about her new novel. Once again, it is called The Payback, and you will hear the two of us in conversation momentarily. Today's episode is brought to you by Tin House, publisher of Wanting, the acclaimed debut novel by Claire Gia. Wanting is the official July pick of my book club, the Otherppl Book Club. You should join the Otherppl Book Club. You can do that right now over at otherppl.com. For less than the cost of a book, you can get a new book delivered to your door every 30 days. I interview book club authors on this program, so it makes for an enriching and holistic literary experience. Wanting, this debut novel by Claire Gia, is a book about friendship and romance and desire. It explores why, even as it destroys us, we always want more. One more time, it's called Wanting, the debut novel by Claire Gia, available from Tin House. So I have a weekly email newsletter. I would love it if you signed up over at bradlisti.substack.com. I also have a new company in the works. It is about to launch very soon, and it is called Deep Dive. It specializes in the creation of long-form educational audio, and the debut course from Deep Dive is called How to Write a Novel. I am the host of the course, and it features more than 50 hours of never-before-heard conversations with dozens of today's leading contemporary authors, people like Melissa Broder, Steve Almond, Emily St. John Mandel, Vivi Ganeshananthan, Wahini Vara, Kimberly King Parsons, Claudia Day, Lynn Steger Strong, Hannah Pittard, Matt Bell, Matthew Salisis, Antoine Wilson, Todd Goldberg, Gina Frangello, Stephen Graham Jones. It is an all-star lineup of instructors, and there has never been, to the best of my knowledge, a writing course quite like this one. So, again, it's called How to Write a Novel, and the company is called Deep Dive. It will be launching soon. You can sign up for the wait list over at www.deepdive.audio, and I will keep you posted here on the show. In fact, I posted a special sneak preview of the course in the podcast feed just a couple of days ago on Sunday. So if you haven't heard that yet, check it out. You can listen to the first episode of the course. It's a conversation with the great Steve Almond. I posted that in the feed for podcast listeners so you can get a taste. So stay tuned. All right, my guest once again is Kashana Cauley. Her new novel is called The Payback, out there now from Atria Books. Kashana is the author of the debut novel The Survivalists, which was named the best book of 2023 by the BBC, Vogue, and other outlets. She is also an accomplished television writer, having worked on The Great North, Pod Save America on HBO, and The Daily Show with Trevor Noah. Her writing has also appeared in a variety of publications, including The New York Times, The Atlantic, Esquire, Rolling Stone, and The New Yorker magazine. I am so happy to welcome Kashana Cauley back onto this show and to share our conversation with all of you right now. So let's get to it. Here she is, folks. This is Kashana Cauley, and her new novel, once again, is called The Payback.
Well, I was one of those people. I'm first generation college. And so I had no idea what people did after college. I would go visit my advisor every week and go, what am I supposed to do? And she gave me advice on how to pick classes, but not on how to get a job, because that really wasn't her area of expertise. So I graduated from the University of Wisconsin. I had no idea what anybody was supposed to do, because my dad worked at General Motors on the assembly line, and my family specifically sent me to college, so I didn't have to do that. So at my wit's end, I took the LSAT, and I did well. And then I got into law school, and then I took out law school loans, which are like buying a house. And so I often refer to those as my house. I have paid them off, but it was mid six-figure debt. And if you fall behind even a month, they call you, and they sound like the Grim Reaper. Like a month's payment is possibly deadly for you. You know, they are very much like, we have a job and we're here to collect this debt, and we're here to sound terrifying. Like it's always Halloween in our industry. And somewhere around the threatening phone calls, I was just like, wow, I mean, I have the kind of debt where you thought about it. It was a big amount. And my friends at law school also had that kind of debt. And we used to talk about it, the weird phone calls, the threats. Over the years, I learned how that debt also can kill your credit rating, which can help you, might hurt you in terms of getting a job. And I read up on all the other things they can kind of do in terms of loan enforcement, but also the size of the student loan industry wowed me. I'm just like, so this many people go into this much debt, and they're threatened all this time. And it's necessary to get at least a college education for folks, because otherwise a lot of different types of jobs won't be available to you. Like McDonald's prefers that you have a college degree. And I started thinking about how awful this is for a lot of people, how a lot of folks are just going to school to better themselves, and they end up getting punished by the student loan industry. That is where this book comes from. The sense that the student loan industry, if you have taken out any sizable amount of loan, is there to punish you. And then what would that punishment look like if you threw it in there with the imagination of a novelist?
When did this originate? Because I know, I'm the child of baby boomers. They didn't have to deal with this shit. Like, they had state college that was super affordable. My dad was first generation college. He was the first person in his family to get a degree. His dad was a first generation American. He was a butcher, no college education, Southern Louisiana. And he and his brothers had a butcher shop. And he sent my dad to college. His brother became a dentist. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, they could afford somehow to do this, and he didn't enter his adult life carrying some huge debt burden. I want to say this started in the 90s. Did it not, or am I wrong?
At the 70s, the California system was free until Reagan was elected governor and chose to make the schools all charge tuition. They caught one of his advisors on the record going, "We would like to charge tuition because we don't want everyone to go to college. We are interested in it being more of an exclusive experience." And so you kind of could start there. The tuition rates were low at first, but yeah, they did skyrocket during the 90s. But the real blow up was probably 2008. A lot of the state funding for the universities died. And so they ended up charging even more tuition and having people take even bigger loans. But yeah, the 90s, the folks I know who went to school during the 90s had sizable debt if their parents weren't paying for it. Tuition was beyond an individual person's reach. Like, you can't work your way through college starting at about the 90s. The boomers didn't go through this. My parents thought this was all nuts too.
Yeah, it seems like unnecessarily punitive and insane. And it also seems like bad for the economy. It seems like you have young people who are interested in bettering themselves. They want to get an education. They want to go out into the work world and make something of themselves. And yet you start them off under the weight of some enormous debt burden which severely limits their ability to participate in the economy, to buy a home, right? Like, wouldn't it be better to like cover the education of young people so that when they get out into the work world and they're participating in the economy, they can do these things? Like, isn't that better for the economy?
If you believe in improving the economy. The current administration doesn't, is some of the problem. And so that's one of the reasons why they've juiced enforcement through the Department of Education for folks who are behind on the loans. And, you could go into the tariffs and a lot of their other economic policy, which is nonsensical. I agree with you. I think that, and I have read up on the size of it. Student loans are an enormous industry. They are hindering a lot of folks from participating in the economy. The goal used to be for young people to go and buy a house, and student loans are definitely putting that out of reach for a lot of folks. But even just everyday consumer spending, like you spend less on food or just any normal other basic consumer good if you're saddled with these loans. It is ridiculous.
That's what I kind of was getting at too. It's like you can't spend because you got to put all this money into paying down your loan. And, I've had conversations over the years, like one of my buddies who's like, I don't know, he's got problematic politics, but we were talking about this and I was like, yeah, student loans should be canceled. This is nuts to do this to people. And we should also say that these, like student loan debt disproportionately affects, like Black women and Black people, people of color, like first generation college students, who are having to pay their own way and need help. Like that's really who the bulk of this debt burden is resting on, right?
Yes. It rests on Black women because we tend to pursue more and more education if we don't find ourselves getting ahead in the job market. But at the same time, we're often paid less when we do get jobs. And so the difference between what we take out in loans and what sorts of jobs we're able to get has kind of grown over time.
Right. Okay. And so, so I'm talking to this friend of mine having this debate and I'm just like, yeah, like state college should be free. Community college should be free. Other countries have figured out how to do this. If we can spend this much money on like bombs and guns, we can certainly find the money to cover like young people wanting to get an education. And he was like, well, they took out the loan. They have to pay the loan off. Like, that's just the way that it works. You can't just cancel this debt. Like, what do you say to that argument?
I think people like that think that folks who take out debt should be punished in a way, that whatever happens to befall them is their fault. And it isn't. It's the fault of the system that charges tuition that is beyond the means of a lot of individuals and their parents. You can't solve a systemic problem by just telling people to buck up and stay in debt to the point where they're not really able to participate in the economy. We all would benefit from folks with big student loans being able to participate in the economy, like you were saying earlier. Even your friend who doesn't want student loans to be forgiven would benefit from the better economy that would result if we didn't have these. There's even something in it for him. So really, systemically, it would be the best thing for everybody to get rid of this debt and this hindrance of participating in the economy.
Yeah. And I think too, like some of these student loan documents, I mean, the argument that I would make to him, as I recall, is like, wait, you're asking like an 18-year-old kid to parse a bunch of like really tedious legalese and loan documents, like possibly with the help of their parents. But if somebody's like a first generation college student, parents probably don't have like a lot of deep experience, like taking out sizable loans like this and reading these documents. And I think they're intentionally confusing and they sort of entrap you into this debt burden, right?
Yes. On top of that, I mean, the terms of the loan may change over time, and it can often be hard if you can't read the documents to figure out how that may come about. And they can also sell your debt to other companies. And so theoretically, you get that on the same terms as you took them out in the first place. But if you don't know what those terms are, that entire process is confusing to folks. I have talked to folks whose loans have changed hands like 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And you have to pay something different. Like you have to pay somebody different, someplace different. And they're always hoping that the payments go through, but sometimes there are just issues in administration. The whole thing is a mess.
Is there a fixed rate? And I'm imagining too, since you went and took the LSATs and when you got your law degree, right? You did finish.
Right.
So I would imagine that your ability to kind of parse these kinds of documents might have improved as you got your like education and law. I'm just wondering, like, does the rate change? Like, does an interest rate change on a student loan? Are there those kinds of predatory loans given out to people where like they think they're paying one thing and then the debt gets sold to some other company and they shift the rate?
To answer the first part of your question, yes, I have a law degree. Yes, under ideal circumstances, I know I would be able to read this paperwork and understand it, but that's not when they give it to you. They give it to you before you have the law degree, when you have no idea what they're talking about. Right. So I actually have no idea what was in my loans any more than anyone else. I did sign that first set when I was 18. I am first generation. My parents didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what it meant. And the people, the financial aid department of your college is just like, could you just sign this? Like, they don't want to talk to you about it. Like, there's nowhere to like ask questions about what it is that you're signing. They just go, well, it's paying your expenses. Well, you're getting an education. You're bettering yourself. They just try to brush past that. Even at law school, when they encourage you to ask questions about the whole world in law school, really, but in the financial aid office, you get like 10 seconds. There are a lot of people coming through. Everybody's getting loans. They just kind of have to get them all done in an afternoon. So you'll be able to get access to funds when you show up on campus. And so you're rushed through this. And most people I know, even if they were to read them, don't understand them, but they're also just not given the opportunity to read it because they have someone else in line who needs to sign a new set of loan documents. So that's the first part of your question. The rates do change. And, since I couldn't parse the documents, I couldn't tell you how that works. I got lucky. I went to a good law school. It kept going down. By the end of my law school loans, I paid off the section of it that was federal loans. Like, I separated those out and kicked them out through AmeriCorps, which used to exist and used to pay some of your loans for you. And that took out my undergrad's loans. But, I had a variable rate on my law school loans that shifted down because I went to Columbia, and Columbians, they thought, were more likely to pay off the loans than people who went to other types of schools. And so it went from like the high twos to like 1.25 over the lifetime of that loan. I know people, though, whose loans have gone in the other direction. The Columbia always told you it was school related, so maybe that's true. I don't know. Again, I could not understand the documents, but even so, from what I could tell, this is beyond what's in the documents, because the way that they describe how the loan amounts change is according to shifts in the economy, but from what I can tell, they're never really specific about what those are. So you can wake up and they just mail you a letter and they go, your rate changed. Or they email you and they go, your rate changed. And then you get a new set of monthly payments and hopefully you can cover those. It's a surprise. It's just like surprise billing when you go to the doctor. It's surprise loan payments and what you owe.
So it's infuriating. Mm-hmm. And I can imagine how you got started on a novel like this. Like, you're like, I'm going to write this wrong. I think that like something I've said often on this show over the years is that in order to sustain the energy that one needs to complete a novel, you need to have like a strong why. Like, why am I writing this book? It can't just be like for fun. I guess it could be, but I don't know anybody like that. There's got to be something driving you, and I can imagine that your frustration with this and like your sense of like morality and justice and kind of wanting to right this wrong got you started and helped to kind of give you the juice to carry it through. But from like a nuts and bolts perspective, like creating this cast of characters and sort of figuring out how you might address the student loan crisis or the scandal, however you want to characterize it, that was a big challenge. Like, can you just talk a little bit about that part of it? Like building the cast and building a plot and trying to find your way toward justice.
I threw out something like 400 pages of character work until I found the voice for this novel. It took me parts of 3 years. The reason why is because I felt like if I didn't get the characters right, it was going to be a very dry novel about the student loan industry. It was going to be technical and boring and everyone was going to fall asleep. And I hate that. I need things to like have punchlines and be entertaining. So I spent a lot of time going, who are these people and why are they funny to me? And why is the whole system they're trapped in kind of absurdist? Because it is. I mean, the number changes on you interest rate wise. Like, it's just like being thrown into a ball pit at Chuck E. Cheese, and hoping you get back out. Like, there is something absurd about all of it. Now, the book didn't click for me until I started listening to the album Don't Be Cruel by Bobby Brown. which is one of the first albums I remember. I was a little kid in the back seat and my parents were obsessed with it. And I saw his videos for the songs on that album and the big pointy suits, like these 80s powers. He's 20 and they're dressing him up like kind of like a hit middle manager. And I was like, who would design these suits? Like, who would come up with this? And that's how I got my 80s power suit designer, Richard. I had always known that Jada was going to be a fashion person, but I didn't know what sort of fashion person she was going to be and how this was going to kind of guide her life. But when I decided that Richard was a designer of 80s power suits, I was like, oh, they're stuck in the mall together. No one wants power suits anymore. And she gets canned from her costume designing job. And they're just hanging out in retail, folding clothes, going, we used to be fabulous. And that is where the book got started.
Okay, yeah. So just for listeners who haven't had a chance to read, like the setup essentially is that Jada is the narrator of the book, the voice of the book. And then she works at a store called Phoenix in a mall in Glendale. And she loves fashion. She's worked on movies and TV shows as a wardrobe specialist. Loves clothes, style, all of that. Richard is the boss at Phoenix. And then there are two other employees there. One is named Lene and the other is named Audrey. Lene is the front woman of a punk band called the Donner Party. And Audrey is a hacker. So I can see how you kind of assembling it's like the A-Team. Do you remember that show from back in the day?
No, but I remember having heard about it from other people.
Yeah. Like, Gen X, it's a show that was in my childhood where like they would always like go out and solve some sort of thing. They were kind of the underworld, but they had like each of them had a specialized skill set that ended up coming to be useful, like depending on whatever was happening. And I can kind of see how you were building this cast in that manner. Is that right? You needed a hacker, right? If you're going to solve the student loan crisis, you had to have somebody doing that kind of like technological work. Was that part of the book challenging to write? Like, did you have to dig in and do a bunch of research into how to hack so that you could render that in a way that was believable?
Oh, yes. I do not come naturally to hacking myself. But I read a great book by this woman named Nicole Perlroth, who laid out basically the basics of what the modern hacking environment looks like and what hackers can hope to achieve at their most extreme. And so it's a great book. It's all like some people knocked out the power system in Ukraine and, like huge consequential hacks and how exactly those hacks are constructed and how those folks tended to bounce between government service and their own private ways of screwing things up for people. And it was just fascinating to start with that set of case studies and then kind of expand the research into other ridiculous things hackers have done. Some of it was that I kind of thought actually that somebody would have hacked the student loan databases by now. I'm shocked that it seems like we're about 5 minutes from this book coming out and no one's done it. If people thought the power grid in Ukraine was good enough, if folks are hacking the airlines that are carrying ICE detainees, I am amazed that given how much people owe and how desperate that debt will make you feel, no one has done that hack yet. But you absolutely cannot have this book without a hacker. You're 100% right. A lot of this is in online databases. I'm sure they have the physical backups, but the core of it is online.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe this feels like a very high concept book, like a great idea. And it is one of those books where you go, yeah, how has this not happened yet? There's so much animus among people who carry this debt. Like I know so many people who struggle with this and are pissed off about it. It's amazing that nobody has ever taken it upon themselves to hack the database and somehow end it. But like on a real, the level of reality, if someone ever did that, there would be physical backups. I guess it would just be a huge undertaking to try to redigitize all that stuff. I don't know how it all works. I guess you'd have backup disks and you'd have to really scrub all of it somehow in order to free people.
Yes, you would. And there would also be online backups upon online backups upon online backups. This debt is very meaningful to the people who are collecting it and enforcing its terms against the holders. And so I can't imagine that there's anything short of a labyrinth of debt information and how it's kept.
So you have the debt police in this book, which is, I believe, your creation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, like, we had to kind of lay the groundwork by talking about the real world aspects of all this stuff. But it should be underscored that this is a very fun book to read. You're a very funny writer. You've worked on The Daily Show. You're good at writing jokes and comedy and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's a really important point from a writerly perspective that if you're taking material like this and you're trying to fashion it into a novel that people will enjoy reading, like there's got to be story, there's got to be character, and it's always nice when there's some humor. It can't just be like a clinical assessment of the loan industry. I think people would either like pass out or throw themselves wade out into the ocean, But the debt police is worth talking about along these lines because it's so funny, and I could kind of feel you having fun with, like, this is kind of a form of revenge, right? Like, can you talk about how you sort of built out that part of the book and how you chose to characterize the collectors, like the debt cops who go around hassling, student loan borrowers?
The debt cops are built because of three things, I would say. One of them is that we're an enforcement country. Like, if you've done anything wrong in the United States, the remedy for that is often some sort of cop. The debt police don't themselves exist, but there are lots of cops for lots of other things. I mean, like, you can be arrested for walking on the wrong side of a street if you're the wrong kind of person in this country. But the penalties for defaulting on your debt hadn't been enforced for about 5 years before Trump took them on, maybe like 2 or 3 months ago. And before that, they would, you could take people's driver's licenses. You could take their commercial truck licenses. They're doing all this stuff now, apparently. They're getting more elbow twisty about it. They really want to make sure you feel threatened by the debt. But they used to do that too. Before the pause, they used to do that. And so looking at the enforcement, looking at people who've lost a lot and have lost so much, in fact, that their ability to pay the loans would be threatened was part of how they came up. I figured it, in a lot of ways, it isn't that big of a leap to just assign a police form that would go kicking doors in and enforcing physically, because we love that as a country. We love people going to a house and knocking down a door and going, you did something wrong, and not necessarily having those charges be super clear or something that necessarily everyone thinks is wrong. Like, oddly, we're going through this with ICE, they're just pulling people and they're brown and they're kicking in their doors, literally. They kicked in doors down here in LA, and they're just getting folks who haven't committed crimes, and they are physically and psychologically harassing them. So that kind of arm of our culture. But before that, they did tons of racial profiling that's kind of like the debt police. And so they're built from that kind of component to our policing and our history of it, and how much we like to enforce order, even in circumstances where that seems like overkill. The second part of their founding, believe it or not, was the Mary Kay ladies. My mom really loved Mary Kay ladies when I was younger. She would get all the catalogs. Her friends would sell the cosmetics. Like, they would work towards the pink Cadillac. There was something culty about them, and there was something kind of fabulous about them. I thought you just bought all the makeup in the catalog and then you were just pretty, like it was just solved. And there was something about them as the solver of your beauty problems, like kind of the ultimate solution of beauty. And also just this crazy cult that was based on pink was part of it. In the book, the debt cops were turquoise. And I just thought it would be great if they had a color scheme. I mean, but they would have to look different than regular cops, is where that started. And so I was like, well, how would they look different than regular cops? And I was like, well, they would be slightly weird cops. And I was like, what if they felt like a cult? What is a fun cult to base them on? And then I remembered the Mary Kay ladies. And the third aspect, is Aaron Rodgers. So like I
wait. We have to pause. We have to take a knee. Kashana went to the University of Wisconsin. You're from Wisconsin, as am I. And so we are both rabid Green Bay Packers fans. And we've like emailed, over the past few years, ever since I discovered that you're a Packers fan, we like check in, especially during the season, like, exchanging thoughts about the Packers. I think we need to lay that foundation for people. So continue with Aaron Rodgers.
I was so excited to talk to you about this. I'm like, if he asks me what the debt police are based on, this is going to be so much fun. I really want him to be the person who understands that they are partially built on being annoyed by Aaron Rodgers. So as a Packer fan, I have found the last few years of Aaron Rodgers annoying. Like when he started losing even earlier and earlier in the playoffs and talking about wellness. He was talking about darkness retreats and his whole COVID vaccine controversy where he was like, I'm immunized, but I don't know what he was doing. I think they're like essential oils or crystals or whatever it was, feelings, vibes. He was immunized by vibes. And I thought, that sort of thing used to be, it's crept more into the mainstream with RFK Jr. and what he's attempted to basically enforce wellness upon an entire population. It used to be you go to a party 10 years ago and somebody might offer you essential oils. And now RFK is like, maybe you're on SSRIs and we send you to a camp to pick organic fruit and like let go of your phone and heal and not have ADHD anymore. But at the beginning of this, it was just, we had to listen to Aaron Rodgers all day long, talking about all this stuff that had nothing to do with football. And it didn't really have anything to do with health, really. I thought wellness involved actually getting well, not just, sitting around in the darkness for 4 days instead of like winning the NFC Championship game. And so a lot of me was just like, the ways in which Aaron Rodgers is weird about wellness would be really funny to assign to a police force, especially in an era as wellness creeps towards something that may be enforced upon other people. And so I took his darkness retreats and his immunization, and I went, what if these guys had weird ideas about vaccines? What if they had weird ideas about purification? What if they thought paying your debt off was a way of purifying yourself? And so in the book, they talk about debt relief or debt payments as a form of purification. It's becoming more well. One of them talked about paying off like a $16 debt or something and then going to Sedona and feeling at peace among the red rocks, just completely cleaned out. So yeah, Aaron Rodgers is the third cut.
I just want to say, as a Packers fan, we have the past two quarterbacks prior to Jordan Love, who is now the quarterback, both Hall of Famers, Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. And I think people who don't even like football or pay attention to sports at all would probably know those names. Mm-hmm. Brett Favre, I don't think he ever got like nailed for it, but it's pretty clear that he committed welfare fraud in the state of Mississippi. Like basically had public funds that were intended for like the poorest of the poor redirected to like build a volleyball court at his daughter's college. Like he kind of was in cahoots with the governor. I don't know all the details, but it was pretty clear that he sort of bilked the Mississippi welfare system. And by the way, this guy's worth a fortune. It wasn't even that much money. He could write a check for $2 million and build a volleyball court, but he didn't. Mm-hmm. He took it from the poor. So as a Packers fan, it's like, okay, well, fuck that guy. Like it was fun to cheer for him for like, all those years. He's a great quarterback, but man, what an asshole. And then we go from that to Aaron Rodgers being like, yeah, I'm immunized. And then it turns out that he meant that he was like you say, using crystals, or he was in Malibu talking to a holistic doctor, and he wasn't vaccinated at all. It was like his own like personal definition of what immunized means, which at the peak of COVID, which is when this happened, that was a kind of a shitty thing to do. It was misleading. You could have at least just been honest about it if you didn't want to get vaccinated, just like own that, but he couldn't do that. And so he then, I think, it's just kind of escalated. He's become like a professional troll. And as far as I know, he hasn't committed welfare fraud, like nothing as overtly toxic and illegal as Brett Favre, but he's just like really hard to like. And he seems to revel in antagonizing people. And I don't know. I guess I'm just kvetching, but it's like, this is crazy that we've had 2 of these in a row. And
people look to him.
Yeah, it's like this bro culture, and then now he's got this wife who nobody has ever seen. And I'm sorry, but I don't believe it. How am I supposed to believe this? Nobody. I get that you want your private life to be private. So if that's the case, why bring up that you're married at all?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you bring it up? And then when people are like, well, where is she? Who is she? Can we see a photo? Then you can act all aggrieved that people are invading your privacy. It's like, dude, nobody asked you until you brought this up yourself. Mm-hmm. So it's like he baits people, and then he gets aggressive when they call him on his bullshit, essentially. And I don't know what's going on. I have my theories. I feel like maybe you could talk about this with Mina Kimes. So hopefully she's going to have you on her show. But it is kind of the elephant in the room. I think there are possibly like sexual orientation things happening. That's all I'll say. I don't like to get into people's business, but he kind of makes you because he's constantly in the public eye and sort of is constantly trolling. But it's the only thing I can think of is that he's got some sort of deep-rooted psychological issue that he's trying to work out or trying to avoid working out. It would make a lot of things make a lot of sense, but what do I know? I have no idea.
But he's working it out through the press.
Yeah.
That's what's insane about it.
It's like leave me alone, and yet he's on every podcast, like talking about how he did ayahuasca and he's into faith healing, and he lives in Malibu. I was just talking about this on the pop culture show that I do with Mira Gonzalez on this podcast, and I was like, yeah, I feel like Malibu is just the world capital of people who are sort of their own self-declared experts in wellness and medicine and healing and all that kind of stuff. It's unbelievable. And I feel like in the age of influencers, there are a lot of people, even people I know, who are suddenly just doing the selfie videos, talking as if they're doctors or something. And I know these people. I'm like, you don't even have a degree in anything related to this. And yet you're kind of taking on the air of an expert. That's crazy. We live in an age where people can just kind of declare themselves experts, or can declare that the experts don't know what they're talking about. So I want to talk with you about kind of the backdrop that your novel is set against, which I think is contemporary America, though it might precede the era that we're living through now. But because you're such a funny person and such a funny writer, and you have this history as a joke writer and writing for The Daily Show, and anybody who follows you on social media knows what an astute observer you are of current events, and you have a really deft way of sort of taking things at speed and finding the joke inside of them, and finding the joke inside of them is often tied to exposing a kind of core truth about a news story or a person or public statement, whatever it happens to be. And you're releasing a book at a time when, as you mentioned a moment ago, Los Angeles is essentially under siege.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy to say that, but I sit around on Instagram. My Instagram stories, I've decided just to share every video that I come across of these masked ICE people just grabbing people and throwing them into a van. It's fucking crazy what we're living through. So I guess my question is twofold. The first of which is what's it like to release a book that has at least one foot in the world of current events? I feel like, student debt is an issue that's very much at the forefront of a lot of people's lives and is related to their understanding of politics and the country as it currently exists. And then just broadly speaking, how are you handling existing through all this?
It's really weird to be releasing a book that is fundamentally about people trying to escape the range and reach of paramilitaries. I wrote this book in 2023 when Los Angeles was not under siege. And I was just, bouncing along between the first part of the book is set in the Glendale Galleria, and thinking about what it would be like if there was a more militarized Los Angeles, actually. If people were afraid of what is basically a rogue police force that used extrajudicial means to harass all the people who they claimed within their jurisdiction. I started my writing career by winning an Esquire writing contest that predicted Hurricane Sandy. My entry did. And then so we were all sitting there and the FEMA trailers were still in New York. And the editor of Esquire was just like, yeah, it's really crazy that we have this thing that we like picked in July. And so my husband says I should stop predicting the future. He's like, I think I think you should stop looking at your crystal ball, or at least are there better futures? I feel bad.
No, but listen, this is your gift, right? I think you have like I call it like your antenna. Like you're paying attention. And the other thing, it's like an antenna, or it's like the canary in the coal mine. Like Kurt Vonnegut used to say this, that writers are sort of the canaries in the coal mine. It's like, we keel over first. And then everybody looks around and goes, what? But like that's what you're doing. And I feel like satire is often like eerily predictive. So I don't know what the piece in Esquire was like with regard to Hurricane Sandy. I imagine it was at least somewhat humorous, right? Was it?
No, I was dead serious in 2012. I was a different.
Oh, you were. Well, what I'll say is that this debt police conceit that exists in your novel, I hope it's not predictive, but it wouldn't surprise me if somehow, once Trump and his regime are done with immigrants, or they've decided with all this new money that they have from the big beautiful bill, if they decide to like expand their purview. If you suddenly told me that like ICE was rolling up on people who had debt and they were being taken to work camps to like pay off their debt, wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, I don't think it's the craziest thought. I hate to say it, but I would imagine you'd probably agree. I
would agree. Unfortunately, once you have that point in your society where people can pull up in unmarked vans without license plates and take people because they're Latino or Hispanic, they could be taking people for any reason. The Trump administration really does hate debt and has promised to use the Department of Education as a weapon against debtors. And so, no, I don't think that connection is hard to draw or not particularly feasible at all. I could see it happening tomorrow. They very much want people who are Americans to be picking fruit. And so they are trying to take the folks who they don't feel are American off of the farms and replace them with folks. And the way that they talk about replacing them is often through things that sound like convict leasing or prison labor. And so if you have anybody who has failed at any part of the American experiment, I think having a lot of loans is something that they consider to be a failure. It would be really easy to imagine them getting picked up in unmarked vans and driven out to the farms to pick fruit, or just incarcerated.
Well, and I've also thought that like the immigrants, the migrants who have been taken by the thousands, I think at this point, and who are existing in detention camps, whether they're, I guess, especially those that are in the States, but some of them are, in El Salvador or Sudan or whatever it is. But the thought has occurred to me, like the way that these people think, like the way that Trump and his ilk think is like, oh, we'll get all these people in these camps and then we'll put them to work. We'll have forced labor, but we will take the money that's generated by their labor. Like it seems like the kind of thing they would do is, have these people on working it off in a forced labor camp, and then somehow the profits are finding their way into Trump's pockets or his cronies' pockets. That would be, I mean, I hate to say it, but that would be like a better outcome than some of the other grim outcomes I can think of for people who are like at, Alligator, Alcatraz or whatever. Like these things can turn grim. So, it's a fucking mess. And, I do, like your husband, I want you to stop predicting the future. You're scaring the shit out of me. And what I think we can do to try to palate cleanse, which I think one often has to do in contemporary times, like you get into a conversation about how things are going. And it's like, okay, let's talk about, I don't know, puppies. Just to try to wipe the slate. But something that I think your novel speaks to very well, and like in a way that for me is relatable as a Gen Xer who kind of grew up going to the mall, is this is a book that loves the mall. Like you must be somebody who has like great affection for the mall, and maybe that's like it could be a Midwestern thing in particular, because California malls are often outdoors. Like you go to like the Grove or whatever. I mean, there are like the Galleria is indoors. You want to know something? I've never been to the Galleria.
What?
All the years I've lived here. Yeah, I've never been. The only person in my family who's never been, but I'm not, I don't go to the mall nowadays, but as a kid, that was what we did. We went to the mall in junior high, even in high school, as like something to do. And you capture the physical experience of being in a mall like very well, like down to the smells, the products, all of that stuff. It's kind of a dying aspect of American culture, right? We've all seen like the husks of like abandoned shopping malls as things have kind of moved online, and these gigantic shopping centers have sort of gone the way of the dinosaur. But I just love to hear you talk about the mall and what it means to you, and like maybe what it meant to you as a kid.
I love the mall. I'm a little younger than you. I'm more in the old millennial bucket of things, but we also hung out at the mall. We were maybe some of the last people who really did it before they started going under. It was very common for folks at my high school to work at the mall just for spending money. I grew up my parents are working class people who ended up doing better for themselves and owning a house. And I went to high school with the sort of people who were, for the most part, a little bit richer than that. But they thought it would be a good idea for their kids to work, to learn responsibility, to learn the value of the dollar. I sometimes feel like growing up in Wisconsin was like growing up in the 50s or something. And so we all had our mall jobs. I worked at JCPenney and I loved it. I worked there for 6 years. I attempted to pay off college during it because I could not find anything that paid me better. I was on commission, just like Jada is in the book. And I did make a lot of money squeezing out credit card applications and selling everything from dresses to sweatshirts to jeans to like flannel shirts. And I loved it. It was the first place where I felt like I could define myself. I wasn't an adult yet, but I could attempt to define myself through my choices and my preferences. And I could be completely independent there. I would just get dropped off for my shifts. And then on my 15-minute breaks and my half-hour lunches, I could be me, whatever that was turning out to be. I could try caffeine. Me and caffeine are not friends. But I could pretend to handle it at the mall. I could go, you know what? I'm going to put a lot of whipped cream on this. It's going to taste good. And then I will not get the shakes. None of that ever happened. I could hang out with my friends. We would go to these 18 and up clubs, me and my Pennies girls. And there would be these like 30-year-old guys. We congratulated ourselves for being adult enough to go to the club, but we had no idea that real adults went to the club. So the club was terrifying as an 18-year-old. We were like, how do I not dance with 30-year-old men? Like, how do you avoid that? But I learned that with my Pennies girls. We talked about our lives so much that we ended up hanging out and becoming friends. You spend so much time bored in retail. Like I know everybody always pictures Black Friday and Christmas, the run up to Christmas. That is a busy period of time. And then I worked in what was called juniors at the time. So it was like teen clothes. And so back to school was very busy. But there were a lot of other points in the retail year where you just sit there getting to know your coworkers forever while you folded pants. And I loved that part of it. I loved working bizarrely with the boredom, occupying yourself, figuring out how to keep busy, getting to know these other people where the only thing you had in common with them is that you wanted to make JCPenney wages. I loved it. We all came from different high schools. Everybody had slightly different backgrounds. One of my girlfriends dated this guy who went onto the NBA, who was kind of like our like local hero. His name is Reese Gaines. I don't think he played for very long, but she would bring him in and we'd all be like, ooh. Like,
wait, where was this? Were you in Madison?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, like I do love the smells. It's where I first fell in love with the idea of picking my own things to eat. I had like a very tiny lunch budget or dinner budget. And like you could go to Taco Bell or you could branch out. It was a place where you could make those first choices for yourselves. The first place to be kind of independent. The first place to be like, who am I and what are my preferences? What do I like? My West Town where I worked in Madison was so dark. I don't know what era it was built in, but it was like such a dark cave. The Glendale Galleria is dark like that. When I stepped into the Glendale Galleria, I fell in love. I was like, oh my God, This is a dark cave. I could have worked here. I could have been bored in this exact building. I walked into the JCPenney's by accident. That was just where I'd parked the first time I went to the gallery, and I was like, I feel like I've worked here. But in the Glendale Galleria, it's still like a lot of California sun trying to get into all those dark corridors. The kids have like surfer hair. It's so much cooler than where I grew up.
Well, the Glendale Galleria has been in a million movies, I feel like, that I grew up watching. Like, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's the movie where, like, if it's an indoor mall in a movie, there's a decent chance that it's the Glendale Galleria.
Mm-hmm.
And Phoenix is the name of the store in your novel. That's a creation, right? There's not a store called Phoenix.
There's no Phoenix.
Okay, but is it based? I was trying to like think of like what it would be, like a representative of. Like, is there a store, or are there stores that you used as kind of a model for Phoenix?
Back in the day, I used to work at Express. We were the most fabulous people in our mall. This was when I lived in Milwaukee. I was working at the Mayfair Mall, and we were the girls I worked with were trying to get discovered. Like, they thought that the modeling agents would show up at this mall in Milwaukee and like spirit them away, and then they would be rich and famous and pretty. They would stand out in the front section, like where you could face the rest of the mall through like the glass sheets or the open part of the store. And they would look very patiently, like try to spot modeling agents or like Hollywood people who were obviously hanging out at a mall in Milwaukee. And I wanted to take that vague mall fanciness and make it a little more Californian. Like, if you took Express and you combined it with like Pacific Sunwear, is the vibe. Yeah. Like, it doesn't make any sense, but it makes sense to everyone who shops there.
I could see the font. Like, when I read Phoenix, I was like, okay, I know what the font for the sign for this store looks like somehow, like intuitively. I also have to ask you, like, when I was a kid, like when you think of the sensory experience of being in a mall, your book really like brings that to life for me. Like, just how vivid those memories are. I have a really shitty memory, but I can remember going to the Northridge Mall in Milwaukee as a kid. That's the mall my mom would go to, and I was a little one, and it was cool to be there. And there was this big fountain, and you would flip like pennies and nickels into this fountain and make wishes or whatever. It's like a scam. All these kids throwing money into this fountain. But I remember just like, that's a memory for me, is being with my mom at this mall and doing that. But more than that, I remember that like chlorinated water smell inside of this mall. And I don't know, it's just like a very powerful sense memory. I remember Spencer's Gifts. I don't know if you grew up. Yep. Did you go to Spencer's? Yes, was there a Spencer's in your? Yeah. So like, that's another big one. I remember being like a teenage boy and going into Spencer's Gifts and like looking at the joke books and the gag gifts and all that kind of stuff. My wife, interestingly, who's from Minneapolis originally, she was a mall girl. She was at the Gap, I think, for a number of years when she was in high school. And to this day can still fold a shirt like beautifully. I kind of envy it. Like, I have to believe you're like a master folder to this day.
I am the person who folds in my family, but I am not as crisp as I used to be. We used to use boards at Penny's, like these big plastic boards. And so you get those really nice, crisp store corners. But I am the person who remembers the technique. And even though I have more laundry than that, it feels like, and I'm trying to whip through it a lot faster than we ever were at Penny's. I do remember the one sleeve and then the next sleeve, and then you roll the whole body of the shirt up and you get this square. Like, I do remember all the techniques.
Well, and like, I as a guy, I don't know if you ever did this, but guy, like a button-down shirt, right? Like a long sleeve button-down shirt at a mall. You buy one and you take it home and it's like pinned. There's like little, what do you call them? Like pins, like stuck in to kind of hold this thing in place. Did you ever do that? Like, is that the stuff that you guys are doing, or do they come that way? Like, who's doing all this pinning? It seems like the most tedious work.
We didn't pin them. They came that way, and it was our job to try and keep them as like crisp and pinned as possible. So you would try to fold in ways that didn't disrupt those pins, or if they had the plastic hooks, sometimes they would have to kind of keep the collar down on the body, or we were just not supposed to disturb that setup as much as we could.
And so if somebody like me comes into the store and tries on one of these shirts and like all the pins come out and I'm trying it on and then I decide it doesn't fit, and so I leave it in the dressing room or whatever. Do you have to refold and repin it, or does it sent away to be repinned? I'm just curious.
If we lose the pins, you don't have to repin it. You do have to refold it so it looks as much like the pin shirts as possible. Then if you lose the pins, the pin shirts still are the model, and you try to get that level of crispness and like preciseness in your fold of the shirt.
Okay. So this is a heist novel. I think that's a fair way to categorize it. It's about a heist. And that's a particular genre. Like we talked earlier about you kind of reading about hacking. I guess that's sort of tied to this idea of it being a heist novel. But I'm curious if you did you really undertake like a close and careful study of like heist movies or heist novels to try to figure out how these things are put together?
I did. And then I probably broke a ton of the rules. I did read a ton of heist novels. I watched a ton of heist movies. I am these days kind of obsessed with blaxploitation. There are a lot of heists in blaxploitation, like 70s, like black people win while doing martial arts movies. There are heists in there. I became obsessed with the assembling of the crew, which I did keep because crews are fantastic. Like everyone has some weird skill. In Ocean's 11, there's that acrobat guy. I love weirdos coming together to solve a problem in a way that only they can, which I feel like is a hallmark of the heist and something I tried to recreate with how my girls are personality-wise and then what their skill sets are. I was obsessed with how non-career criminals in particular become the sorts of people who do a heist. Like how desperate would you have to be was something I thought about a lot. And also, what skill sets do non-career criminals decide that they have that are sufficient to carry off a heist was a question that occupied me for about a year. Yeah, like Audrey's a hacker and you absolutely could not get into student loan databases and attempt to erase anything without her. But also, what sorts of people would she need to work with her? What would be the other components of a student loan heist? What sort of physical thing would there be, in part so the reader can picture it, in part because there has to be some sort of physical backup somewhere along the line, even if it's under 10 layers of electronic backups. I thought a lot about how crews operate and their personalities and how those personalities clash in heist movies and in heist books too. Like everybody's always having an argument because there's no rules in criminality and it could all fall apart at any second and you could just hate each other or somebody could rat on everybody. It always feels like because criminality has no rules and you're always threatened with huge consequences if you get caught, that even keeping your crew together can be a struggle long enough to do the heist and hopefully long enough to get away with it without having someone snitch. And so I looked at those interpersonal dynamics a lot too.
What's the there's a Spike Lee heist movie that I fucking loved. I think it's like my favorite heist movie and I'm blanking on the name of it. It's going to bother me so much that I'm just going to look it up because it's like that. I'm thinking of Ocean's 11. Are there other heist movies that you watched that, or like not, are there novels in this genre? Like, let's see.
I read the novel Cotton Comes to Harlem and I watched the movie Cotton Comes to Harlem because even though I knew that I didn't want to start with a heist, I wanted to see in the book, I wanted to see what the narrative looked like if you started with the heist and just sort of unraveled who did it, like you reverse engineered it, because I thought paradoxically that would be a good way of seeing how heists are put together, and it is. They start out, the thieves in that one steal a bale of cotton from Harlem. The real premise is that Black people in Harlem are kind of fed up with living in Harlem and poverty and drugs. And so there's this scammer that sells them tickets to go back to Africa. And the scammer takes all the money from those tickets and hides it in a bale of cotton, which is not a place that anybody would think of looking for money because nobody wants to deal with the ideas and the meanings and the history of slavery behind bales of cotton in 1970s in Harlem. And so it's these two detectives trying to find a bale of cotton because they know that's where the money is, and then trying to figure out over the process who has the bale of cotton and who did the heist beyond the obviously fake preacher guy who's taking $1,000 a person for this ship back to Africa that never sails. And I absolutely loved it.
The Spike Lee movie is called Inside Man. Yeah. So I have a friend. like I'm thinking of heists in like the contemporary age. I have a friend, guy I grew up with, who not too long ago I'm on the phone with, and he starts telling me how he was out, and he, he's kind of a libertine. That'd be a way to put it. He's living his life in Brooklyn, going out like multiple nights a week. Doesn't have any kids or anything, and he's like, "Yeah, I went out the other night, and I was having some drinks, and then I was talking to this, buddy of mine that I had met recently. We were kind of coming out of the bar at the same time, and I was going to get on my bike to ride home, and he's like, yeah, and I was talking to this guy, and I was like, give me your Instagram so we can, I think this guy's a musician. My buddy's kind of a musician / photographer. He's like, give me your Instagram and I'll hit you up. And so they're in the process of doing this with their phones, and it's like probably 3:00 in the morning. Like God knows what hour it was, but it was late after the bars had shut down in New York. And somebody walks past my friend and just snatches his phone and starts sprinting. And so my buddy, who's probably like hammered and possibly other things, starts chasing him. And he tells me that this guy is sprinting and he's like catching up to him. But then as this guy's running, he goes past a car that has its window open, and he throws the phone into the window to one of his accomplices, who catches it, and the car takes off. And my friend, this is the part of it where things go, you just go, what? My friend's like, yeah. And then I don't have my phone. I go back to my apartment, and, I get on my computer and I start to like check my bank accounts, and I see the expenditures like ticking off. And they ended up stealing $250,000 in crypto from his like Coinbase account. That was his like entire life savings that he had somehow had in crypto. That's the part of it where I'm like, what? But I'm like, and then I started, and he's like, yeah, this has been going on in New York. Like this shit happens all the time. And I couldn't get my phone to shut down. And without a phone, I couldn't call my banks, all this stuff, and they sort of had to have your phone number in order to believe it was actually you. And it was a huge catastrophe for him. And there's no real way for them to trace cryptocurrency, right? So it's impossible to really recover the funds that were stolen. I don't think he's gotten a penny of it back as of the last time I talked to him. But I was like, that's like a very modern heist. Mm-hmm. You steal somebody's phone while it's open, and then unless those apps have like a face recognition component that like a setting, people can just go into your shit, steal your money. So I don't know, maybe for your next book. But I could not believe that's a lot of money to lose when you're like leaving the bar in Brooklyn on like a random Tuesday or whatever. That's a catastrophe. I didn't even know that could happen, but apparently this stuff, people steal phones for that reason now. It's like a loophole that people can get in, because if your phone is already open, they can do damage. If it's locked, it's a different story. So next time you're coming out of the bar drunk at 2 a.m, Kashana, just make sure your phone is on lockdown.
That's so advanced. The one time someone stole my phone, it was because of the most old school heist. I was studying abroad in Spain, and it was very much a don't carry a purse, you'll pickpocket it kind of place. And I was in a tourist town, and these two people come up and they have this argument in front of me. Like we're all standing in line for ice cream, like it's a touristy ice cream shop. And they have this huge argument, and I speak Spanish. I understand what they're talking about, but it's just boring. And then these guys who were selling clothes out on the blanket out back in this tourist square were like, they took your phone. And I was like, what? Like I didn't even notice. That's how smooth they were. They were little, and they were pushing this baby carriage. And I was like, oh, well, they're parents just having a hard time. But in Spain, you can completely cover your baby carriage. It was the custom at this point. It's like completely, and you can't see into the inside. And it's not just like the little plastic sheet or whatever. It was like opaque. And that was fine. Like the baby was napping or whatever. It turns out that the gig was that the baby carriages were all full of phones that they would resell. And so because of the habit of taking out babies in these completely covered strollers, nobody would ever guess that they didn't have a baby. they wouldn't know that it was a phone scam. Like, people knew that, but I think what they were getting at is you don't peek under somebody's stroller and go, I need to see your baby.
Right. I was just going to say, I demand to see the child. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, there's levels of sophistication to it. I feel like those pickpockets in like European capitals can be really good at what they do. Like one of my aunts, my parents went to like, I want to say it was Rome with some of my mom comes from a big family and, some of her siblings, and they all kind of went over there as a bunch of couples. And I want to say like 2 or 3 of them lost their phones or their wallets or something because they got onto an elevator with somebody or whatever it was. But I had never heard of somebody snatching your phone and then going into your crypto account and like draining your bank account. That's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that you talked earlier about taking the LSATs and getting a law degree. You've had a really interesting career. I want to say we probably talked a bit about it the first time you were on the show, but it's worth kind of touching on it again because you've taken a kind of circuitous route to publishing. And you've also had success in film and television. And you're a lawyer, you're bilingual. I mean, like, can you just talk a little bit about the experience of going from being a law student to somehow writing for a TV show, to being like a social media sensation, which you kind of are, and then publishing novels?
Well, I mean, I had the kind of kid who didn't eat the silica gel packets. So I realized pretty early that he was actually going to be easy. And I had left the law and had this baby. And I was like, he's not going to be high maintenance. What am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I said, well, I'd always wanted to tell jokes. So I just started telling jokes on Twitter, which was a great opportunity to just kind of throw out 10 things a day and see what worked and what didn't and what I liked and what didn't. And there was this huge captive audience. This was like the early teens. Twitter was kind of at its peak. And then after 5 years of that, I knew what I liked to tell jokes on. I know what I like to do. The Daily Show people actually DM'd me in the middle of the night on a Saturday. I thought it was fake. I was like, oh, these guys are fucking with me. And they were like, have you ever considered working for television? I was 5 years into telling jokes on the internet. I had just mentally settled around the idea that writing for television would be fun. But as a first generation college student, I thought TV might as well have been written by elves. I could not see a feasible career path that I could follow that would get me there. So when all that work was done for me by some Daily Show guy DMing me in the middle of the night, I was honestly like, what? And he was just like, okay, I know you might have heard things about working for television, but like, give me a shot. And I'm like, sure. I mean, if you're real, I'll listen to you. And he's like, the other guy is going to get in touch with you. And I get up at that Sunday morning and Roy Wood Jr. emailed me and it's like, okay, can we meet? And I was like, all right. Cause I'm like, this is fake, obviously. And also he's going to kill me. So we're going to do this in a crowded place. I took him to the crowdest Starbucks I could think of in Brooklyn that was close to where I lived. And we came, and then of course it was completely fun. We just made fun of Steve Harvey for half an hour because he just visited the White House in 2017 and like seen the gold toilet, and Get Out had just come out and he looked like he'd come from the sunken place. And we were just like, and then Roy ended up doing a Steve Harvey imitation, I think 2 nights after that. But we were just chatting and he was just a really funny, nice guy. And he thought I was funny. We were just laughing. I honestly didn't think this would amount to much. And then he was like, well, have you ever thought about writing for television? And I had just done, in late night, you get hired because you write a set of jokes for this thing called a packet. And I had just done my packet for Oliver because somebody had reached out to me and said like, oh, you seem like you're having fun telling political jokes. You might be a good fit for Oliver. And so I just filled that out and sent it. And what's funny is I was also auditioning for The Onion at that point. Same period of time, same 2 weeks of my life. Everybody reached out. And so I was like just figuring out how to submit headlines to them. And so I told him all that. And he was like, no, you can't go work for Oliver. And then he was texting on the phone. And then 10 minutes later, he's like, Trevor wants to see you. We'll send a car. And I was like, okay, sure. Like, this is also obviously fake. Like, none of this happens to people. And also, I'll walk. I'm not fancy. I don't need a car. It's in half an hour. I hike from the subway in like mid-calf snow, I think, when I went out there.
Wow. So this is all on the basis of your Twitter.
Yeah, this is all on the basis of my tweets. And so I'm wearing this suit and I've got a t-shirt underneath it because the last time I had like a real interview is for being a lawyer, but I figured I had to be more fun for a comedy job. So I would wear this t-shirt under my suit. And I come in and they're like, is this a bit? I'm like, no, I just thought I would try to appear fun. And they're all like laughing at the suit t-shirt combo. I thought that's what people did to be laid back and hip. I had no connection to like real life culture. And they laughed. And then we had the non-job interview of my life.
And you just chatted with them?
Yeah, we just chatted. And they laughed at stuff I said, and I laughed at stuff they said. And they were just like, well, when can you start? And I was like, well, this isn't real. And I said, but I mean, I got to find some childcare. 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks, I reported to The Daily Show. And then I worked there for about a year. It was never seemed any more believable the entire time.
That's crazy. That's unbelievable. I mean, it's truly, but I've heard more than one story of somebody, like especially joke writers, getting picked up based on the strength of their like tweets or social media presence. And like, this is something you were just kind of doing off the cuff. Like, how seriously did you take it? I think people listening might be like, well, how did you do it? Like, did you develop a formula? Over the course of 5 years, I would imagine you probably got better at making jokes and like sort of figuring out where the joke was inside of a story. So like process-wise, you're reading the news, you're responding to the news. That's the nut of it when it comes to political humor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how does it go? Like, you read a story, there's something absurd about it. Is there trial and error, or do the good ones tend to kind of come in fast and it's like first draft, first thought, best thought? Do you know what I'm saying? I
have to think that whatever I want to joke about is funny. And then the joke is my way of explaining to other people why I think it's funny. It needs to have a setup and it needs to have a punchline. I loved the Twitter character limit. It made jokes shorter and cleaner and sharper. And so I would figure out what I found was funny. I would construct the setup, and then I would look for the twist so that the punchline was a surprise. I think everybody does this. This is basic joke format. I just got into the rhythm of it, doing this like 5-10 times a day.
5 or 10. Okay. Cause that's the thing. Like, how much time were you pretty committed to like a certain number of jokes every day, or was it variable?
It was variable because at the time I was also a freelance journalist and I also had a small baby kid, but I tried to put up 10 things a day just to work the muscle. And later, as I gained audience and stuff, I really just stuck to things I felt like and didn't feel a need to hit 10 jokes a day. But sometimes you're just rolling too, and that's fun. And then people respond and they have jokes and they're fun, and you're just kind of riffing together.
Yeah. Some days like Trump gets COVID and it's just like, okay, let's go.
Yes.
Remember that day? That's like stands out like as a social media day. I've never seen like more action, more excitement. I don't know what you call it, but that's wild, that all of this sort of springs from just deciding to tweet jokes while you're taking care of a newborn. And I'm wondering, like, things have kind of grown since then. You've written for TV shows. I'm imagining you've probably tried to adapt your own stuff. Like, is that happening with this book or with your previous book? And what's going on in the world of film and TV for you at present?
I had a director for The Survivalists, but she kind of disappeared. So that's just sitting there. The thing about Hollywood, though, is you're really supposed to sit on all your books you wrote, because if somebody decides they might want to make one of them, they might go back into your back catalog and make more than one of them. So you never know. People could become interested in The Survivalists tomorrow. I actually get media requests all the time for it because everybody feels that the government and institutions have failed them and they might just have to rough it themselves with a full cabinet of like beef jerky in a dream. And so they contact me as if I could get them through that 3-week period in their lives where they think they're going to die. The current book gets rounds of interest. We're in the middle of one right now, but it is not optioned yet. We'll just see what happens with that. When you're in the middle of the round, you just see. Okay, so last question. I should have asked it earlier, but I have to ask it before we part company, and it has to do with fashion, because Jada, the sort of heroine of your novel, or the protagonist, is very much into fashion and like helps people find the right look. Is this something you specialize in? I was like the 11-year-old who was going to the library and I was reading sci-fi, but I was reading Vogue and Cosmo and Elle and Allure. It was kind of the golden age of magazines, right before they kind of all lost all that advertising revenue and therefore all their pages of fashion, right in like the aughts. And so I loved them. I thought they were art. I thought it was that the looks were much more extreme. I mean, growing up in Wisconsin, everybody just kind of wore sweaters all the time and sweatshirts and coats. And so there were all these other things you could wear. I mean, we didn't have the climate for them, but theoretically, if you were someplace else, you could look fabulous. And so it became my dream. I said, someday I will live someplace else and I will look fabulous. And then when I worked at Penny's, I got super, super into it. I could do the thing Jada does in the book. I could look at you and be like 28-inch waist, 6.5 size shoe. Your sunglasses should be no bigger than 55 millimeters. And so I would pull things from the rack for you after sizing you up, and people would be amazed. I'm like, this isn't that hard of a skill. You see enough people, you understand how they measure kind of with your eyes. You can, and you know what works for different body types. And so because we were on commission, we were encouraged to do that kind of custom work. I got really into outfitting people. I also loved outfitting our mannequins, which was really more the visual department, but the visual department took a liking to me and my bottomless well of enthusiasm for dressing anything that happened to be in my area. And so we talked about the dimensions of like mannequins and how best to dress them. And they took suggestions and I got to try things on there too. I ended up after the mall I did a legal internship with Kenneth Cole, which is like real fashion. And so you would go in and we would be wearing like corduroys in the back of the legal department. But the fashion people would be out doing shoots in like this everything was an unfinished warehouse in that era of New York. And we were no different. There were all these beams on the wall. And then that looked unfinished and in the ceiling. And then in the middle, people would be pulling clothes off a rack and doing shoots with the models. And I thought that was so cool. I was looking to make sure that we could copyright all of the shoe names and the clothing names, that they weren't duplicative or already copyrighted. But in the meantime, I could walk through the lobby that I would take to get to my legal job and see people doing the photo shoots with the models. I loved that. I also did, I hung out with the costume designer on The Daily Show because me and Red did an ad for that about nicotine in Black communities that I wrote. And so she was like, well, what do you want him to wear? And I was like, oh my God, I can pick that. And so I dressed him up like a cigarette. It was 95 degrees in Harlem on the day of our shoot. And he's like, I mean, I know, I see you got me in a suit here. And I was like, you are a cigarette, my man. You are wearing a 3-piece brown suit because you are the human embodiment of a cigarette entering Black. And he laughed. And I forget, it was nominated for some sort of award. I just forget how ads work because I've only written one of them. But outfitting him was so much fun, and talking to her about, yes, they wear suits, but they were all trying to do different things with the suits, the male and female correspondents, Trevor, and what sorts of images and they would like to portray with the suits, and how they wore like a bigger variety of colors and cuts, I think, than most people do in suits because they had to wear suits all the time. And so just hanging out with her and learning how that worked was amazing. And all of this kind of worked its way into Jada. Hanging out at Kenneth Cole and seeing the models, hanging out in Hollywood and seeing the costume designers, and then hanging out in retail and just outfitting people by eye and bringing things over and going, this is good for you. This is good for your body type. You should wear this.
So I've only ever talked to you over the transom. And so I've only ever seen like you from essentially like the shoulders up. So when you go out on the town here in Los Angeles, you're still in LA, right?
Yeah.
So when you go out on the town, are you like dressed to the nines typically? Like, do you have like a strong fashion presentation? I don't even know how to talk about it. Do you present yourself fashionably in public? Like, do you have, would I notice you, I guess is the question, if I saw you out in public?
I apparently have a look for LA. I wear all these big headscarves and these high-waisted shorts, and the fashion people are like, whoa, you're trying to do something. I didn't realize how like athleisure and laid back everybody would be. And I think on some level, I'm still protesting that a little bit, coming from like 16 years of New York, where I definitely had a look, where I was sharp and on point and with each season. But like, you don't have to own as many clothes here is the problem. The weather is warm enough that you don't need a 4-season wardrobe. And so I struggle. In general, if they had those makeover shows, I would totally audition for it. I would love for somebody to just give me an idea of what to wear in California. And honestly, Jada is sort of based in that too. She's also a transplanted New Yorker. as I was. And she's just like, what do Californians wear? She struggles at her retail job. She's like, how do I work through these Californian sensibilities? And I struggle with that too.
Yeah, I would love for somebody, if I had the money, just to have somebody like just bring clothes to me and just be like, this is what looks good on you. Like, so I don't have time to do all that. And I feel like maybe I'm the like quintessential example of like the dude who wears the same thing every day, wears a lot of sweatpants. It's bad, Kashana. It's real bad. I feel like you might be horrified. I'm wondering if just by looking at me online, can you tell what waist size I have just by looking at me?
I would need to actually see you. You'd need to stand up.
Oh yeah, you can't just like look into my eyes and decode it
and go 32. No, I cannot.
Yeah.
Somebody should be able to do that. That's a good skill.
Well, before we hang up here, I just want everybody listening to know that Kashana is the first guest in the history of this program who has ever spoken to me from her bathroom. And the reason is that there's like roof construction going on. There was like some sort of power tool happening in the other room that we could hear. So she kindly, retreated to the bathroom. I feel like we got great sound. So I thank you for that. And I congratulate you on this new novel and all that you have going. And I thank you for the time.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I love your questions. I love that you're a Packers fan. I love that I'm doing this in a bathroom. This has really been a great time around.
You'll never forget it.
No.
All right, that was my conversation with Kashana Cauley about her new novel, The Payback. It is available now from Atria Books. You can find Kashana on the internet at KashanaCauley.com, and be sure to follow her on Bluesky and Instagram. And read her book, especially if you're carrying student loan debt. It can be cathartic for you. It can help you exercise some of your rage while laughing at the same time, somehow. You know what I'm saying? So one more time, the book is called The Payback. Out there now, wherever books are sold, go get your copy right away. Don't forget to subscribe to this show wherever you listen. You can also subscribe on YouTube, and you can follow me on Bluesky and Instagram. Join my newsletter. Subscribe to my weekly newsletter over at bradlisti.substack.com. And if you love this program, support this program over at patreon.com/otherpplpod. And if you want to get an Other People t-shirt or a sweatshirt, or if you want to join the Other People book club, you can do all of the above at the show's official website, otherppl.com. And if you're interested in my new company, Deep Dive, and the debut course, How to Write a Novel, it's all going to be happening very soon. It's going to be launching soon. Join the waitlist over at www.deepdive.audio and follow Deep Dive on Bluesky and Instagram. Last but not least, I need a small favor. If you would be so kind, please give this show a rating wherever you listen. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. Rate it. And then if it's possible to write a quick review, write a review. It helps the show in the algorithm, and it helps it find new listeners. Okay, so I think that does it for today. I will be back on Thursday, God willing, with another episode of Brad and Mira for The Culture, this podcast's weekly pop culture assessment. I will be joined, as always, by Mira Gonzalez, my friend and co-host, and we'll try to break it down. And we just talk. It's a show that's meant to be light and meaningless. It's a hangout show. You turn it on while you're cooking, or while you're like on the treadmill, or you're commuting, and you just need a break from reality. So check it out, Brad and Mira for The Culture on Thursday. Stay tuned.